Good evening. I trust you had a fruitful day. I do not say happy, though I hope it has been happy. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Buddha, the blessed, noble, and fully self-awakened one. Could you just tell me if the sound is okay? Could you put a little note in there for me? We've got a new laptop, you see, and I'm hoping it's using the sound from this little camera. Yeah, is the sound all right? Sounds fine, thank you very much. Okay, so we're tackling this problem of karma. So just let me repeat the sort of basic phrase that the Buddha uses, the basic formula. Beings are owners of their actions, right? You own it. You are heir to your actions, whatever consequences there are, they'll be yours. They originate from their actions. In other words, you're born of your actions, moment after moment. You're bound to them. You're chained to your actions. And your actions are your refuge, hopefully a good refuge. It is action that distinguishes between inferior and superior. And then we went through various things. Now, you have to remember, these are very broad brushstrokes, right? I mean, if some man or woman, if we were to go around killing, murderous, bloody-handed, given to blows and violence, if we did that all our lives, then we would surely end up in a dreadful place. But we don't do that all our lives. It's a big mixture. We also like to abstain from such things and take care of animals and stuff like that, you see. So our lives are a balance between those things that are unskillful, those things that are skillful. So it becomes impossible to say what our destiny is, except in that broadest way, that if we've been generally good, we should be okay. Breathe easy. Now, what I want to center on tonight is the fact that, of course, not everything that happens to us is our personal karma. So that's very important. So although the Buddha did not formalize this, these sections are taken from what he spoke at various times during his lifetime, and they're called niyama, or laws. So the first one is to do with Utu, which is the seasons, energy. So it's to do with physics, chemistry, etc. It's to do with the mineral world. Now, as you know, for instance, we had a few years ago that terrible tsunami, and killed many people. So it would be foolish for those people to think, well, or foolish for people to think that those people who drowned must have done something terrible in their past lives. When we're born on the earth, we are subject to the physics of the earth, the chemistry of the earth. And now when it comes to, of course, climate crisis, that's something else, because there we are definitely explicitly involved. But when it comes to just natural disasters, and we may be caught up in them, then it's just one of those things that we have to accept. It's part of the risk of becoming a human being. Now, the next one is bija, which means seed. So that's all our genetics. So again, it would be very wrong to think that somebody who was born with an hereditary disease somehow deserves it, right? That would be completely wrong, because, as well, we know that our genes are coming up from who knows where, and we've ended up with this particular combination. So there's not much to do with personal karma there. Although, of course, it's understood that the mind can have an effect on the body, but definitely I don't think it would be right to think of hereditary diseases or something that happens at birth through the birth process, whereby the body is injured in some way, as being personal karma. Now, what would be personal karma is, of course, how we relate to the body that we're in. Now, that comes elsewhere, but the actual body itself is what is given to us by our genes. Then there comes karma, of course, which we are actually going into. So that's the moral level of the universe, and that's really to do with how we feel inside ourselves, the meaningfulness of our lives. Our happiness is very much tied in to our goodness, although not necessarily so, of course. If you're a sadist, then you might find some happiness in torturing people. So it's not always clean cut. But what we can say is that whatever is not beneficial to us, not beneficial to others, or to both, will lead to an unhappy place within us. Now, there are examples that come to mind. If you remember the terrible Moors murders that went back in the 60s, Brady and Myra Hindley. So she seems to have come to some sort of forgiveness about it by being a Christian. But Brady went mad, of course, eventually, and seems to have been okay. He got his mind back a bit. And when he was asked, did he ever think about the murders of those boys and girls, he says if he did, it would drive him mad. So it's obviously that something was boiling in him, and that, of course, would manifest in his rebirth. Well, he will be reborn in Buddhist terms, and that will manifest. He'll have to work through that karma, you see. So it's the same even when you think of, Stalin, Hitler, Pol Pot, all these people that we know have perpetrated tremendous evils. They themselves will have to suffer the consequences of that. Then there's Dharma, the law of Dharma, the spiritual laws. So this is, the Four Noble Truths, basically, and everything that comes out of the Four Noble Truths. So that comes pretty straightforward. And of course, involved in that is our karma, right? Because it's all to do with understanding how we create suffering, how we undermine that sense of suffering or unsatisfactoriness, and liberate ourselves. And the final one is chitta. So I've left that finally. Normally, it doesn't come in the order that I've given. But the chitta is the heart mind. In the old days, you would have referred to it as the soul. The spirit was something else. So the closest word would be something like psyche, both the heart and mind, emotional and thought life. And a lot of it is given, the way we perceive things. If you're born with poor hearing, then of course you won't hear so well. If you're born with color blindness, you'll see the world in a different way than other people see it. So the actual basis of contact with the world is also given to us, you see. And what we do with it inside, of course, is also to do very much with just our whole basic psychology. Behind, of course, then we have this relationship of wanting, not wanting. But I suppose with this terrible murder of George Floyd, the question of social karma comes into play, and anybody who sees that, I was trying not to see it, but my brother sent me the transcript of what he was pleading for. And I did actually go and watch it, and it's beyond words, isn't it? And what can we say? We can say that when we're born into a society, and we are given, whether we like it or not, the ignorances, the delusions, and the biases and the prejudices of that society. I'm a little bit confused the way people use bias and prejudice and all that, but in a sense, that prejudice remains within us as just a delusion. That's how we think. So every nation, every tribe thinks of itself as superior to others, you know, and that sense of superiority is just an extension of the self, an extension of the ego, of me. And of course, what the self does is it creates a fence, it creates a barrier, and it feels sort of safe when it has other people within the same corral. So you've got lots of little egos, all little selves all together supporting each other, and so the prejudices, the delusions of that society are maintained. And our job, our purpose is to really recognize a prejudice when it comes into our consciousness, you know, and we may be slightly disturbed by how prejudicial we might be, just caught here and there in certain circumstances, racial prejudice, sexism, and all that sort of stuff. And we have to be careful, because we have this self-esteem which says, oh, you know, I'm not racial, I'm not this, I'm not that. But when it comes up, you have to be quite honest to ourselves, right? It's impossible for anybody in society not to be prejudiced. It's just part of our makeup. Our purpose in terms of purifying our hearts is to, first of all, really accept that everybody's prejudiced one way or the other in all these fields, and to actually accept it, and then, of course, to recognize, to be sharp when it appears always first in the mind, and to point to it and say, well, that's prejudice, that's judgmental, you know, and not to indulge it. And then very slowly, it has less and less an effect. As you know, if something is repressed within us, then it will manifest anyway. I mean, Freudian slips and all that. And Jung said something I thought was of tremendous profundity. He said, whatever is repressed will manifest as fate. Will manifest as fate. In other words, whether you like it or not, all our all our repressed prejudices and feelings and all that are actually having an effect on the way we are moving now, affecting the way that we relate to people, the way that we're working, the way that we're in the world. They've done all sorts of studies during my time when I was a teacher about the way that teachers quite unconsciously treat girls and boys differently, how they treat people from ethnic groups, whether they are, you know, black people or whatever, Indians or whatever, colored people, and white people, depending on whether the teacher themselves is white or otherwise. So all that's been, you know, heavily studied and quite well known. And it's up to the teacher then to recognize those biases and not allow it to distort their teaching. So it's a really, really very difficult area for us to really be very truthful to ourselves about our own prejudices, and to allow ourselves to be honest about it, and then to make that decision. Well, you know, I'm not acting on it. So if we're not acting on it, there's no consequence. This is the law of karma, right? So whatever the desire is in this particular discussion about prejudice, whatever that desire is, so long as it remains as some idea, some intention in the mind, nothing's happened. I mean, that's really important to grasp. So there's no reason to feel guilt about it. Yeah, there's no reason to feel shame about it. It's not necessary to do that. It's just necessary to say, ah, this is it. That's a racial thought. That's a sexist thought, and so on. And to just stay above it, you know, just to stay with it and allow it to die away, right? And if we do get caught up in thoughts about it, to really, you know, pull ourselves off it and recognize it, sink into the heart, you know, and to be kind to ourselves, you see, and to be able to forgive ourselves, to be, you know, to actually say to ourselves, well, you know, that's part of my upbringing, that will always be there, you know, and this may come as a surprise. Those little conditionings will be there even if we are fully liberated. They're known as vasana. These vasana are sort of leftover traces of conditionings. But of course, in somebody who is liberated, it's impossible for them to be caught up in it. But they remain the mind. They will actually appear in given circumstances. So, recognizing that, it is basically our job to be aware of any negativity, especially prejudices, and so on and so forth, and to just be honest about it, you know. And there's no shame for that. There's no guilt. That's the part of the baggage that we end up being given when we're born into a society. So this dreadful occasion, which I hope, I mean, people are saying that it may have a real fundamental change in America and across the world, hopefully. It's funny how something like that in plain sight can be truly shocking. I remember the Vietnam War, that picture, I'm sure you all remember it, the picture of that young girl. Well, there were lots of them running, but there was that young girl, that naked young girl, burning with napalm on her back from a bomb, and that sort of picture was just so shocking that I think it wasn't long after that the Americans pulled out of Vietnam. So it's good to sit with these sorts of things and you know, just bear with the horror of it, really. So well, I can only hope my words have been of some assistance, and that through all of our efforts to actually perceive what is unwholesome in us and not to activate it, not to act upon it, we will slowly liberate our hearts from all this negativity and become fully liberated from all suffering sooner rather than later.